PowerPoint slides off to the side here to talk to you about parentheses. You've seen parentheses come up a bit here in us doing these translations, but I actually want to draw your attention to some examples that Hurley provides in section 5.1, kind of halfway through the section. And I'm specifically talking about this series of examples he uses, which talk about Prozac relieves depression and Allegra combats allergies, or Zocor lowers cholesterol. So if you can find that in your book, that'll help as we go through these. So, first of all, he talks about the first example in that list that I'm going to use. Prozac relieves depression and Allegra combats allergies, or Zocor lowers cholesterol. And I'm hopeful that after all of this discussion or work so far, that you would at least be able to come up with regard to that. Prozac relieves depression, and Allegra combats allergies, or Zocor lowers cholesterol. In other words, you could recognize the dot and the wedge in there, and you would get P dot A wedge Z. Now, the problem here is that this statement, as written, is ambiguous. It's unclear. And as I've indicated before, if there's one thing that logicians, people who do logic, hate, it's ambiguity. They like to be as precise as possible. And that's the reason there's ambiguity here is because just written as it is here, we're not sure if this is really saying P dot A or Z. Or P dot A or Z. And you might be asking yourself, well, what's the difference there? And can it make any difference? And so to illustrate this, I actually like to kind of tell a funny story from my own career, or at least attempts at getting hired in teaching philosophy. So many years ago, I saw a job advertisement for a position teaching philosophy in Hawaii. And of course, that got my attention. Sounds like a nice place to work. And I looked at the job requirements, and when you looked at them, I don't remember exactly what they were, but they were whatever. And then they had in all capital letters and then they had something else. And then they had in all capital letters or something else there. And I looked at that, and of course, immediately I thought, yes, in fact, they do need somebody to help them with philosophy, or at least thinking logically, because this is ambiguous. I thought to myself, well, to meet the minimum requirements for this job, do I need to have this and one of these things, right? That's one possibility of reading this. You need to have this for sure, and then one of these two things. That's a possibility. But given the way it was written, it would also be possible to interpret this as you would meet the minimum requirements as if you had this and this, you're good to go. Or forget about all that. As long as you had this one down here, you're ready for the position. And so it was ambiguous. And of course, that makes a big difference in terms of whether or not somebody might be qualified. So, you might wonder, well, how do you solve a problem like that? And the way to solve a problem like that is just to apply for the job anyway and let them figure out whether or not you're qualified. So, of course, that's what I did. And I do have to say, I did get an interview. It was great, good excuse to go to Hawaii. I did not get the job, as it turns out. And curiously enough, the college actually went out of business a few years later. I'm not saying that that's directly tied to my not being hired there. But anyway, I'll let you think about that. Joke. At any rate, you can hopefully see here how parentheses can play a big role in determining the meaning of a sentence. And I want to go back now to these exercises from the book to help us think about what are the clues that tell us where to put these parentheses in. All right, as soon as Okay. So, the very first instance of Hurley's examples here actually has it turn out like this, the first case right here. I'll stand out to the side so you can see it better. Right there. And so the way the sentence reads is this. Prozac relieves depression and Allegra combats allergies, or Zocor lowers cholesterol. Now, you might have heard me pause there after the Allegra claim. And the reason I did that, of course, as you look at the text, is that there is a comma here in the sentence. It occurs right here. And of course, that's our clue for why the parentheses go on the left-hand side. The comma groups those two things together. You can see that at work here in the next example, which, as you can see in the book, ends up looking like this. And so the way we read that one is, Prozac relieves depression and Allegra combats allergies, or Zocor lowers cholesterol. So again, the comma occurs after the Prozac claim, and so you pause there, and that groups the other two together here as well. But we can go on here and look at the third example, which says, either Prozac relieves depression and Allegra combats allergies, or Zocor lowers cholesterol. And as you can see, it looks like this first example here. Now, how does Hurley know to group those together in that case? There's no comma there to provide that clue. But what there is the word either. So it's saying in the very first word, either. So this sentence then, this first sentence will be an overall an either or. Either P and A or Z. Compare that with the next one. Prozac, which looks like this. Prozac relieves depression and either. So now we have the word either grouping these two together. Either Allegra combats allergies or Zocor lowers cholesterol. So those words either, or that word either, tells you how to group these together. The next one. Prozac relieves depression. It looks a little different here, I guess, so I need to write that. Prozac relieves depression and both Allegra, or, I got it wrong. Prozac relieves depression or both Allegra combats allergies and Zocor lowers cholesterol. So it looks like this. All right, and so there we have the word both functioning to group those together. Prozac relieves depression or both this and this, grouping those together. Finally, we have one that ends up looking like this here in the middle. And it says, Prozac relieves depression and Allegra or Zocor lowers cholesterol. Now here there are no commas, there's no either, there's no both. How does Hurley know to group these together? Well, notice it says Prozac relieves depression and Allegra or Zocor. So the Allegra claim is not fully written out. It's abbreviated together. It's joined in that sense with the Zocor claim. So we put the parentheses around those two there. Okay, so that's what you need to be thinking about when it comes to parentheses. I will just say that this is tricky. And I should say as well that doing the, remember we talked about the either or and neither nor and both are not and so forth. Very tricky stuff as well. And so I'd really commend to you for your note sheet for the exam on this material to put some of these examples here from the book that deal with how to put parentheses in the right place. And you see there those at the page we were just looking at. And then the whole neither nor examples are covered on the next page as well. So those might be good examples for you to put on your note sheet or the ones that I've been talking about from the PowerPoint slides. But key here is to remember that simply having, just erase it here. Simply having P.A wedge Z, that is not what's called a well-formed formula. Okay, and that's the next topic here that I want to talk to you about. This is not saying anything specific, and so this is actually, we could say, not quite correct or incorrect. So, having said that, and again, I'm going to not show the PowerPoint slides here, but I'll just give you the gist of it on the screen here. I'll just share with you this important statement. John, they, bachelor is. Right? I doubt you've heard that one before, but at any rate, here it is. And you think about this, John, they, bachelor is. Well, there's nothing to think about because this is nonsense. This is, you could call it word salad. Having said that, John, they, bachelor it is. Each of these individual words is a word in the English language that makes sense on its own. But again, put together in this way, they don't make any sense. The same thing, and here's the point, the same thing is true of statements in propositional logic. And so we need to be careful about this. What we want is to have statements in propositional logic that turn out to be what are called well-formed. Okay? So, This statement here is a well-formed formula in propositional logic. We call those, actually, if you ever wanted an opportunity to bark in a class, here's your opportunity. They're called WOOFs, well-formed formulas. This is a WOOF. The symbols are put together in a way that makes sense. And we want to make sure that the same thing happens whenever we're putting together symbols in propositional logic. And to help us with that, right, we can look at some exercises here in 5.1, specifically exercise set number 3. There in that section. And I want to kind of run through some of those with you here to make sure you understand what makes some of those statements, or hopefully all of them, or at least some of them, I should say, well-formed, and some of them won't be well-formed, and what makes them not well-formed, what makes them instances of statements where the symbols are put together sort of a word salad manner, we might say. Okay, so we're looking at exercise set 3 from 5.1, and let me just continue to get this cleaned up a little bit here. Looks like I have Windex, so maybe that'll help a little bit. This lecture is brought to you by Windex, apparently. Okay, so looking at that first example there, number 1, where it says, let me get a little bit more Windex, sorry. Where it says, S dot tilde T wedge tilde U dot W. So what we're looking at here, it doesn't really matter what that represents, but what we're thinking about is this a well-formed formula? Are the symbols put together here in a way that makes sense in propositional logic? And as we look at it, in fact, it does, right? It's a complicated statement, but it is one that would make sense in propositional logic. It's essentially either this or this, and this statement over here is a conjunction, one of which of the pieces is a negation. And this is also a conjunction. In this case, the first piece is a negation. Now, that's a well-formed formula, or WOOF, if you like. Just to be clear, if I were to take away even just one set of parentheses here, or even just one parenthesis, this is no longer well-formed, right? Because we don't know if this is saying this, or maybe it could be S dot all of this, right? If we don't have parentheses there to tell us that, this is a possibility. By the way, that brings to mind the way that Hurley uses parentheses is, of course, he starts off with curved parentheses and then moves to square brackets. And then if we get a really fancy statement, right, really lucky, we can get curvy brackets there as well. And that's all great, and feel free to use that sort of format. I'll just let you know, though, that as far as I'm concerned, parentheses within parentheses, as long as they all pair off appropriately, that's perfectly fine with me. Okay. So, back to these exercises here. All right, we'll go ahead and look at number 2. So need more Windex. All right. Nice and clean. Okay. Number 2. So let's look at that statement, right? Is that well-formed or not? Well, usually when people look at this, what jumps out at them is this part right here, right? Parenthesis, horseshoe G. What's going on with that? In fact, that is a problem. This statement is not well-formed. This proposition is not well-formed. So what you need to know about that is dot, the wedge, the horseshoe, and the triple bar, these four operators always join to